Live with CDP, a weekly sports and entertainment podcast live on YouTube, Facebook Live, Twitter, and on audio via Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, and Anchor FM. Now here's your host, Chris Palme.
Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to Live with CDP podcast on this Tuesday, June 14th, 2022. Coming off midnights, I sometimes lose track of the days, but I want to say welcome to Live with CDP podcast, season 3, episode 52 today, and I'm looking forward to my guest today, and he's a longtime TV play-by-play announcer for the Philadelphia Flyers. Jim Jackson since 95-96, I believe, along with Keith Jones. And they do the Flyer games on NBC Sports in Philadelphia. So I'm looking forward to speaking to Jim about the Flyers and maybe a little about the NHL playoffs and a little bit about his career in broadcasting and how he started up as well. So just give me one moment, guys, and I'm going to bring on the voice of the NHL's Philadelphia Flyers, Jim Jackson. Good afternoon, Jim. How you doing?
Doing great, Chris. How are you?
I'm doing okay. I'm hanging in there, and it's hard to believe it's June 14th already.
Yeah, I mean, time kind of flies. I mean, for the Flyers, it was an early summer vacation. I got to do a couple games on TNT, but it seems like we're already ready for next season already. We got a lot to happen here, though, in the offseason, and the season's not even over. Great finals ahead of us.
And I was going to say, I'm a longtime Detroit Red Wings fan, by the way, but I've always had a soft spot for the Flyers when you guys don't play Detroit. So I know the NHL draft's coming up July 7th and 8th, and the Flyers and Red Wings it's going to be important for them to both have a strong draft this year.
Yeah, Flyers are picking higher than they want to be picking, that's for sure. In terms of you don't want to be picking 5th because that probably means you're coming off a tough season, and that is the case with the Flyers. But and it's a weird draft because for a couple of years this particular crop didn't get to play as many games, and I don't think there was many people that were really 100% sure on some of the prospects. Everyone talking Shane Wright, of course, but there are others that have kind of emerged, and I wouldn't be surprised to see a guy picked lower in this draft that becomes maybe the best player out of this draft, just because there haven't been as many scouting opportunities. More regular this year, and things have really changed a lot in terms of the rankings as this year's gone along. So we'll see. But the Flyers need to add a player. Picking that high, you need to add a player that's going to help your team in a big way. I mean, be a top 6 player as a forward or a top 4 defenseman. If you choose to go the goalie route, it's got to be a guy who's going to play for your team. When you're picking that high, you definitely have to make it work.
Okay, and here's a little story for you too. My first NHL game was the Red Wings and Flyers in 1981 at the Joe Louis Arena, and that was the last time I seen the Flyers play live. So it's been 41 years since I've been to a Flyers game. So I'm gonna have to either do one in Philadelphia or see you guys come to Detroit or Buffalo next year.
Yeah, it's time, Chris. Come on,
yeah.
It's time. 40 years is a long enough wait. I mean, I've been here. This will be my 30th year of broadcasting coming up. I actually started in 93, 94. I did 2 years on radio and then moved over to television. So for me, I've been here 30 years and, 40 years without watching a game. Come on, it's time.
I know. And where it's like, where did the time go? I was looking at it today. It was 20 years since the Red Wings won their 2002 Cup with the Hall of Fame team, and then it was 25 years ago, 97 against your Flyers. Unfortunately, I know for you guys, but it's just, you're right. The years go by quick.
Well, they do. I mean, I remember being on the ice. I was on the bench as the Red Wings got the cup that night, and I was actually on the ice when they got the cup the next year. I was working for NHL radio and was interviewing players as they beat the Capitals for their second straight cup, and that does not seem like 24, 25 years ago, but it is. The time does move on. Time waits for no one, and I remember back when the Wings won in 97, of course, the big chant was, of course, the drought that the Red Wings had since winning their last cup. Well, the Flyers are now approaching 50 years without a cup, so they've got that. And there's
Yeah, guys, just bear with us. It's just the internet connection with Jim. He did warn me ahead of time, so
Yeah, they're working on our internet here. I
Yep.
can't do much about it. It's
No.
about every 15 minutes I'm going to freeze.
Okay, so we're good for no worries. It does happen. It's even happened with me too with technology. So, but I was gonna say, yeah, you know what? It just shows you how hard it is to win a championship in professional sports. And to me, I'm biased. I still think the Stanley Cup is the hardest championship to win out of all the major four sports.
I don't think there's any doubt about it. The Lombardi Trophy in football is hard because it's a hard sport, and they're playing more and more games now, 17, and obviously then they have to win 3 or 4 in some cases games to win the Lombardi Trophy. But come on, they're playing once a week. The NHL is a long grind through training camp, preseason games, 82 regular season games, and then 4 playoff series you have to win. And if you've been watching the playoffs this year, you see how competitive it is, how intense it is, the physicality, the speed. It's been phenomenal entertainment this year to watch, but I can only imagine as a player on either the Lightning or the Avs, how worn out you must feel. These teams have had some sweeps, so that's helped them, but they're still playing a lot of hockey. And I do agree. I think it's the hardest trophy to win. You really basically at some point face some kind of major adversity if you're going to win the Stanley Cup. And then you just have to somehow make it through physically, let alone mentally, to get to hoist that cup. And I think it is the hardest. It's the best trophy, and I think it's the hardest trophy to win.
I was going to say, and the Lightning are the first team since the Oilers in 83, 84, 85 to go to the Cup 3 times in a row. And the Islanders, obviously, they went 5 years in a row from 80 to 84. Just shows you how hard it is to go to the Cup once, but now 3 straight years like Tampa Bay's done.
Right, and those teams, not taking anything away from those teams, because the Flyers also went to 3 straight finals back in the
Yes,
mid '70s.
70s.
I'm not taking anything away from those teams, but there was no salary cap back then, and the salary cap makes it very difficult to keep your team together. The Lightning have done a remarkable job. Steve Yzerman built the team, but then the people who've come in since have done a spectacular job just supplementing. They lose their entire third line after last year, replace it, and now they have guys, Nick Paul and Brandon Hagel and guys like this is playing big roles with this team. They have, of course, the great core. There's no doubt that's what carries them, but they've had to add those players around that core under the constraints of a tight salary cap, and they've somehow been able to do that and make it to 3 straight cup. If they actually win this series, and I would slightly favor the Colorado Avalanche. The odds makers are more than slightly favoring them. But I'll tell you what, Tampa has a way of slowing down these offensive teams. And if they slow down Colorado, they're going to frustrate Nathan McKinnon. They're going to frustrate Cale Makar. And we might see a different Colorado team than we've seen through most of these playoffs. So I wouldn't put it past the Lightning to win this series. And if they do, 3 straight cup wins in the salary cap era, to me, is like 5 or 6 straight in any other era. It's just a tremendous thing. I think it's, you say, are they a dynasty? I think they're already a dynasty. What is it? 6 of the last 8 seasons they've gone to the conference finals. I think they're already a dynasty. But if they win the cup, they win this series, I think they're one of the best dynasties the sport has ever seen, given the parameters they've had to work with.
Okay, I'm going to put you on the spot before we get to some questions. Who do you like in this series, Tampa Bay or Colorado?
Well, if I was pushed and I had to put money on it, I think my mind says Colorado, just because in watching them, they've been so impressive. I mean, they just took apart an Edmonton team that seemed to be going on all cylinders heading into that series. And they beat a very tough St. Louis team. They blew out Nashville. Nashville didn't really have their goaltender, but I mean, they've been really impressive. Whereas Tampa, had to just survive against Toronto. They were very impressive against Florida, but then fell behind the Rangers 2-0 and had to really battle back there. So the Lightning have looked a little bit more vulnerable at times. But as I said earlier, they have taken teams like Toronto and the Rangers and Florida that are really can be high-octane teams. And when they've needed to, they have shut those teams down. And if they're able to do that to Colorado, they're going to win this series. So if I had money to put on this series, I wouldn't. I don't really know who's going to win. But I looking at the fact that Tampa's being, at last I saw, a pretty heavy underdog, I think there's more value in a Tampa pick than there is a Colorado one right now.
Do you know what the status of Nadam Kadri is going to be? Because he's a key player for the Avalanche too.
Yeah, I know they just had their the coach and general manager Bednar and Sakic just spoke, so there may be some news on this I'm not aware of, but I didn't hear what they were saying. But I have a feeling he's going to appear in this series. It's a hand injury. He won't be at 100%. Braden Point is a lower body injury that I think is quite serious. He's been skating a lot. You think he might make an appearance. So those are kind of the wild cards going into the series. And those are huge wild cards. We're talking about Nazem Kadri coming off his best year and at times was considered a Hart Trophy candidate. So that's how good his year was. And Braden Point, if you look back to the Lightning in their last 2 cup wins, he's been right there as one of their best players and their most important players. So if either of them are able to come back at close to 100% and the other one doesn't, that's a series swaying kind of move. Now, if they both come back and they're both not 100%, maybe it's a wash. If they both come back and they're both full bore, maybe it's a wash. But if one comes back in a much better position, in a better position to contribute in this series than the other, then I think that can sway the series. That's how important those players are.
Okay. I'm just going to get to some questions now for you, Jim.
Sure.
The first question, can you just tell my audience here in Guelph, I'm just outside of Toronto, the home of the Guelph Storm here. Just tell us a little bit about yourself. When did you decide you wanted to pursue a career in journalism and broadcasting, play-by-play?
I grew up in upstate New York, not all that far from where you are, in Utica, which is down the thruway. I could zip up through Buffalo and go to Toronto. I did it a couple of times when I was young. And I was in a very small school, graduating class of 73 kids. So I was kind of the small town kid who had the dream to broadcast professional sports. From whenever I can remember, I just loved sports. It wasn't one particular sport. I was a 4-for-4 guy back then. Soccer wasn't as big. So it was football, basketball, baseball, hockey. Those were my 4 sports. And I followed them equally. And I was all over them. I did stats. I was a nerd, all that kind of stuff. I used my tape recorder, did games off my television. And I of course, I think we all start wanting to play, and I played youth sports, but I quickly realized I was not going to make it to the major league level as an athlete. So I had to find another way. And my father was actually the one who suggested, he says, you're always talking about it. You're always doing the stats. You're actually doing games into a tape recorder. Why don't you go into broadcasting? And I was an hour from Syracuse, which was one of the best schools for communications around, and they call it the cradle of sports broadcasting. So that became my goal from when I was in grade school, and I had to get my grades up to get into Newhouse, the School of Public Communications. There you have to have really good grades, and I got in. So really, I went to Syracuse, and then my ambition got even greater because I was around kids from all over the country, and I was fortunate enough to be able to do basketball and football and some lacrosse there and all kinds of sports casts and sports talk shows, and just immersed myself in it. And I loved it. And I knew that's what I wanted to do. And I was lucky enough to reach my goal. It took me about 7 years out of college. It usually takes longer than that, to be honest with you. I got some huge breaks. I made a couple breaks, but I got some huge breaks. And I was hired by the Flyers back in 1993 after doing the Utica Devils for 6 years, and 1 year of ACHL hockey before that, which is now the ECHL. And, I made my way here. I didn't choose hockey. Hockey kind of chose me. The AHL came to my hometown, Utica, and I was at the station that got the rights. So there I was doing the games. But, I did high school football. I did New York Penn League baseball. I did Division I college basketball for a year. Utica College was Division I under Larry Costello for a year. And so I've done all the sports, and I loved them all. I never had a preference. I'm known as a hockey guy now, and I love the sport. Don't get me wrong. But I would have taken a job in any of the 4 sports at the major league level. And I ended up getting to do baseball here for 14 years with the Phillies too. So I ended up doing 2 of those 4 sports. So that was pretty cool.
I was going to say, you already answered my next question. And that's one thing I've been learning from all the guys that have come on my show. Listening skills are huge. You ask, I guess, one question, they could give you answers to 2, 3, 4, 5 other questions. So this other one I wanted to ask you, did you have any mentors when you were first starting out in the industry?
I didn't really. I certainly didn't as a kid because, as I said, I was in a small town in upstate New York. There wasn't the internet back then, so I couldn't communicate. Right now, I'm doing broadcast coaching, and I'm mentoring a lot of kids, and I'm thoroughly enjoying it. So rewarding. I wish they had that when I was a kid, the ability to do this, talk to someone in their living room and, talk about the broadcasting business. But back then we didn't have that. So I didn't really have any. I had announcers that I certainly idolized. Dan Kelly was my hockey guy. Pat Summerall was my football announcer. Marv Albert was my basketball. And Bob Murphy, who was a longtime voice of the New York Mets, was my baseball guy. Those four were it for me. I mean, I thought they were just the best in all the sports. Then when I got into college, some of the upperclassmen were kind of my mentors. And when I went to Utica, after I got out of college, I didn't have a job at all. And I went to the local radio station that did News Talk Sports. And I basically just asked if I could hang around for a month, kind of an unpaid internship. But I guess because I was a local kid and I was a Syracuse grad, they let me do it. And the sports director of that station's name was Tim Roy. And he had a sports talk show. And I started helping him out, and I hung around for a while. And my very first job in commercial broadcasting was I was the producer. I put quotes around that, producer of a Polish radio show. It was her name was Maria Kowalski. She was the host, and she'd point, and I'd start the polka. And I did some English commercial reads, and that was it. That was my start. But that's why I've gotten to do this team for the last 30 years, because I noticed I was at this station. And that was on Sunday morning. And I noticed later in the day, they'd carry other sports. They'd carry CBS sports, Yankees, baseball. They'd carry Syracuse sports and the local sports. But around it, they'd play music. Whereas all week long, they had News Talk Sports. So I, freshly out of college, I put together this written proposal to put a weekend talk show, sports talk show around their sporting events. They went for it. I created myself a job. And Tim Roy, the sports director, kind of became my mentor. But it was only about a year later that he left to go to Birmingham. And so I was now there as a full-time employee. I became the sports director. And it was only about 9 months after that the New Jersey Devils moved their AHL team from Portland, Maine to Utica. Bingo. I'm like 24 years old and I'm doing AHL hockey. So, got breaks, made breaks, whatever. I did those 6 years and then came here. But Tim became kind of a mentor for me. Tim is now the longtime voice of the Golden State Warriors, about to perhaps get himself another ring. And, it was great to have him around. I went to school with a whole bunch of guys who've gone on to success in the business, and we're the same age. So I don't know if you'd say we mentor each other, but we've certainly given each other advice on our rides through this business. The likes of Dan Horde, who's in Cincinnati, Sean McDonough, Greg Papa, Craig Minervini. These are all guys who've put their stamp in the broadcast business, who were in college with me, either in my class or a year separated from me. But I can't say that I had anybody who was in the business that was my mentor. I mean, I met Bob Murphy. We basically stalked him at Wrigley Field when we were there to go to a Cubs-Mets game. We were actually there to do a Northwestern Syracuse football game. And Craig Minervini and I were huge Bob Murphy fans. So you can't get out of the booth in Wrigley Field without going down through the stands. So we basically waited after the game was over, and they just suffered a crushing loss in 1984 as they were trying to get their way into contention. Rick Sutcliffe beat Ron Darling that day. But we hung out and we stalked, and Bob came out, and, he had to be depressed. His team had just lost a big game, pretty much getting eliminated from a playoff push. And yet he came out and he was so nice to us. And it was awesome to see this guy who I had listened to through my childhood and be such a nice guy. But I can't say he was a mentor. That was my only connection with him. So my mentors were basically the people I worked with and for throughout. But now we have this thing. I mean, I'm broadcast coaching now, and I have 35 to 40 kids now that I've done the course with since I started in November 2020. And I tell them, once you do the course with me, it's just three 1-hour sessions. I'm your mentor for life if you want me. I mean, I'm not forcing myself on them, but if they want me, I'm here. They have my phone number. They have my email. They can text, call, or email me anytime with questions. And many of them, thankfully, have stayed in touch. And it's been very rewarding to see them as they take steps up the ladder in their broadcast journeys. So mentors are important. I didn't have any real ones that were like established in the business, but certainly now you can have them.
Okay. I was going to say, it just shows you how important volunteering or internships are. And I'm doing volunteer work right now with Rogers TV here near Toronto for all the Guelph Storm games as a camera operator, and I'm trying to learn as much as I can about the TV side of broadcasting as I am doing with the radio side with the podcasting. And I was going to say, my last guest, Tony Ambrosio from TSN, he's been in the business a long time too, and he's also a teacher at a college here for sports broadcasting. So a lot of guys in your industry, Jim, not just yourself, they seem to love teaching the younger people in school about broadcasting and media as well.
Yeah, I mean, I have a passion for the business, but it's more my passion for people. Love to see the we're talking.
Guys,
Got me back?
yeah, got you back.
It's like
You're right. It was only 3 seconds.
just about 15 minutes for 3
Yeah.
seconds. Seems like they're working on something to me.
Absolutely.
So, as I was saying, I mean, I have a passion for the business, but I have more of a passion for the people. One student of mine was doing NAHL hockey, which is low-level U.S. junior hockey, and he's now doing the American Hockey League. He's one step from the NHL. He got the job. I called on his behalf, and it's just been great to try to help these kids. I know it's tough. You get out of school, and there are more opportunities now than there used to be, but there's also more competition. So it's really heated out there, and I'll do whatever I can to help my students. So, yeah, I see a lot of us get into it after the fact, whether they're actual professors at universities or they do it more on a freelance basis as I am. It's great. I didn't have that as a kid. I would have given anything to be able to talk to a Bob Murphy or a Pat Summerall like this. So, and I'm not saying I'm those people by no means, but I'm a guy who made it to a top league and a couple of top leagues, and have spent a lot of time in the business. So I can basically tell them some of the mistakes I made, and hopefully they can avoid those mistakes on their way up through the journey.
And I had one of your guests on last week, Ria Trilo, I believe.
Oh, Ria, yes.
Yeah, Ria, yeah.
Prize pupil, yes.
Definitely. So, and you're the fifth guy I've had on from Philadelphia, including Tom McCarthy as well. And he's a great guy too, the voice
No
of
doubt.
the Phillies and the NFL and CBS and
Yep.
and stuff like that. And one of my friends, the Philly sports guy, he loves, you would know him if you saw him. He paints his face up for the Flyers, the Phillies, the Eagles, everything. He's the one that kind of gave me a hand with his podcasting. And I'm trying to do this the unconventional way. And I'm just going to keep working hard on my podcast, my volunteer work with Rogers, and I'm also now a media freelancer with the CFL here and the NBL of Canada Pro Basketball League. So now I'm doing live interviews, speaking to coaches and players, and writing blogs too now. So I'm just trying to do as much as I can.
Yeah, it seems like it's your dream, and that's what I tell every single one of my students. If you have a dream to make it, you got to go for that dream. We have way too many people in this world who are at the very worst, absolutely upset and miserable in their jobs, and at the very best bored with their jobs. Just too many people like that. If you can find a passion and figure out a way to make a living at it, as the old saying goes, you'll never work a day in your life. And it's just for these people, I think, as it would have been for me back in my days as a youngster, they probably think that's never going to happen to me. And I'm living proof it can happen to you. I was a kid in a small town in upstate New York, and I made it to my broadcast dream. So it can happen. You're going to have adversity. You're going to have people tell you you're crazy. You're going to have people tell you you're bad. And in fact, with social media now, people tell you you're bad even once you've made it. But you just have to be able to push through all that. And if I use this, I call it my pep speech, but preparation, experience, and perseverance. If you have those three things and you apply it to this business, your chances of success go up exponentially. I can't guarantee it. There's still the wild west out there with this business. I can't guarantee you'll be successful. But if you decide to give it up, you make that decision. You know it in your heart or maybe between your ears, not somebody else. You don't need anybody else telling you you're crazy, get out of it. You'll know. And hopefully that day never comes, but you will know if it's time to go into something else. And the other thing about sports broadcasting is there are so many ancillary businesses, PR, sales, management, whatever, in this business that a lot of people branch off, and they branch off with the hope that they're going to go back on course and end up on the air. But I know many people who have branched off and then have kept going and have found something. I'll give you a quick story. There was a kid at Westchester University, which is not far from here, who contacted me about 8 years ago to come to his class and speak. And so I did. And at the end of the speech, he thanked me and he came up to me and said, "Hey, I've got some clips. Can you listen to them? I really want to make it in this business." And you couldn't have been more ambitious than this kid was. And I said, "You got to push for it. Absolutely go for it." And I listened to his stuff and it was pretty good. And I said to him, I go, you got to polish it, but you have potential to make it in this business. So give it a shot. Well, he got out of school and there was nothing there. And he contacted me and said, "What should I do?" And I said, "Well, just keep looking. You might have to work for free for a little bit." I told him my story. And wouldn't you know, I heard about an internship opportunity with the Flyers. And so I contacted him and said, it's a no pay game day kind of internship thing, but you'll be around sports, you'll meet people. And if you don't have anything else, why not? So he did that. And the 6 months came to an end. And he came back to me and said, I liked it. It was good. And I still want to get into the broadcasting. I said, "That's good." I said, the Phillies, I was working for both teams at the time. He said, "The Phillies have an actual PR opening. And now with this 6 months of PR internship under your belt, you might have a chance for it. Do you want to go for it and, keep pushing for broadcast?" And he said, "I might as well." Well, he's now second in command, I think, of the Philadelphia Phillies public relations department. He went over there. And I remember 2 or 3 years ago, right before the Phillies and I parted ways, I went to him and I said, "You still have that itch to broadcast?" He goes, "I would have loved to do that, but I'm loving this too much." So that happens. And so you branch off and you end up finding another path to being very happy, but at least gun for that dream to start and not be 20 years from now thinking back, if I only gave it a chance, if I only gave it a chance, I would have never forgiven myself if I had listened to my mom, who did not want me to be a broadcaster. She wanted me to be a veterinarian. My father was a veterinarian. I could have taken over his practice. I love animals, have my animals, but I didn't have the same passion for animals that I did for sports. So I followed through, and she fought me all the way through college, all the way through my years in Utica working, even my first couple of years here in radio in Philly. I think when she saw my paycheck when I was doing television, she said, "Okay, you're going to be fine." But she fought me tooth and nail, and I just wouldn't let her dissuade me. In the beginning, it could have actually just prevented me from even giving it a shot. After that, it became more of just a pain in the butt, but she basically just didn't think it was the way I should go. I disagreed. It was my dream. I followed, I persevered, and I made it.
And I can relate to that a little bit too. My story is that's why I love about this podcast. Everybody's story is different, but yours is kind of motivating as well. I got a taste of broadcasting a couple years ago by accident, and I really liked it. And it led to me volunteering with Rogers TV here, and then it led to my podcast. And then one other thing too, Jim, that you mentioned is contacts, connections, and never say no to opportunity. And you have to reach out too. I've reached out to the Ontario Hockey League, the Canadian Football League, and they've been giving me opportunities as a media member to cover the games and do what everyone else does, like talk to coaches and players after the games and write stories during the game as well.
Yeah, you absolutely have to take advantage of every opportunity you get. As I like to say, there's no such thing as bad experience. People say, "What are you talking about? I have a bad experience every day." And I'm like, okay, we all have a bad experience. But even if you have a bad experience in a job situation, you probably learn something about maybe
Absolutely.
yourself,
Yeah.
maybe about yourself, maybe about that particular part of the business, or maybe about that company that you worked for. But as long as you're learning something about the business or yourself or what have you, it's not bad experience, because life is all about learning from your experiences. We're hopefully wiser as we get older and we have more experiences in our back pocket. But the bottom line is, get those experiences. I do not believe there is such thing as bad experience. A bad experience, of course. I'll have a bad experience probably later on today in some way, shape, or form. This internet is a bad experience. But the bottom line is, you learn from. I'm going to learn that I've got to call Xfinity ahead of time and get this taken care of. But, you learn from it. And so if you learn from it and you learn something from an experience, while it might have felt like a bad experience, it was good experience because you did get something out of it.
Absolutely. And I've taken some of my current job skills that I've used and I applied it to my media situation and how I talk to people like coaches and players and stuff like that as well.
And absolutely. And,
Definitely.
athletes go through this too. And most athletes, there are some, the real special ones that, they're just phenomenal from day one. But most athletes at some point are either cut from a team or aren't as good as they feel they should be on a team. They aren't playing the role they feel they should. They have some coach that for some reason doesn't like them, what have you. The athletes usually go through some of this having to persevere as well. So,
Yeah.
and in fact, it's probably throughout all of business, that PEP that I talked about, preparation, experience, and perseverance. You probably have to have that in any business, to be honest with you. But I definitely know you need it in this business.
And one of my inspirations too is Vince Papale. He's the reason I became an Eagles fan. And his
Invincible.
and Vince knows about my story, and he's always telling me you'll be the oldest rookie to be in broadcasting. And he's a great motivation speaker and somebody I look up to. And it's not age is just a number. It's not how you start a game; it's how you finish it.
No doubt. And I've had students ranging from 12 to 59 in my broadcast coaching classes. The 59-year-old is starting up. In fact, it's going very well. A streaming sports service down in South Florida where he covers some of the junior hockey and college hockey that exist in Florida. And, he's doing games and he's enjoying it.
Awesome.
So, yeah, absolutely. Really, life is too short to be miserable in a job. I would rather make decent money in a job I like than make great money in a job I hate. Um,
Absolutely.
because I've found, and I've been fortunate enough to make enough money to have a comfortable living, but I've found that the money comes and goes. It's really more. For instance, the Phillies. I mean, I worked 14 years for the Phillies, and then they told me after the 2020 season that I was a luxury they could no longer afford. So I was out and it hurt, but because of that, I got into this broadcast coaching. And I can tell you with 100% certainty that doing the broadcast coaching and seeing the smiles on the faces of people like Rhea Troilo and other students I've had as they make their way into the business and take another step is way more rewarding than me having a great pre or post game show or a good couple of innings in the middle innings broadcasting the Philadelphia Phillies. So I'm not making as much money. It definitely hurt in terms of the paycheck, in terms of the income for the family. I won't lie about that, but it's much more rewarding what I'm doing now. And I've got other things, other side hustles as well to make some money, but it's a very rewarding thing. So be happy in what you do. Find a way to make a living that you can be comfortable for sure. You don't have to be a billionaire to be happy. And in fact, many billionaires and millionaires aren't happy. So just find a job that you like. And as I said, you won't work a day in your life. You'll just go to the place of work and you'll do it, enjoy it, get paid for it. And then you'll have time in your downtime to have fun and enjoy life as well. So sounds easy. It's easier said than done. I will give you that. If we could all do that, a lot of us would all be happier. But I think it's one of the keys to life, quite frankly.
Okay. Are you okay for a few more questions, a few more
Sure.
minutes?
Yep.
Okay, time-wise. I wanted to ask you, and that's great advice too. This one I wanted to ask you, how did you end up coming about the role with the Flyers as their radio guy first in '93? And I reworded this question too, because I had Bob Sochi of the Patriots. He had to not replace, but fall in the footsteps of Gil Sanos. What was it like falling in the footsteps of the late, great Gene Hart?
Yeah, I mean, I was fortunate enough my first 2 years here doing radio to kind of work with Gene. He was doing television, so we traveled together. We were around each other all the time. I got to see how he prepared. I tell a preparation story for my classes about Gene. He used to carry around this big, huge black binder full of information. Didn't have a laptop back then. And, I look at him and I feel myself like I was woefully underprepared compared to him. But finally, after 2 or 3 months into my first season, I said, Gene, I mean, how much of that do you really use? I mean, that big binder. Hockey's a fast sport. You can't possibly be using a big. And he looked at me like the cat who swallowed the canary. He was all happy, waiting for me to ask that question. He was probably about 10%. And of course, I fell right into his trap, and I said, 10%? I mean, that means, when you're preparing, you're wasting 90% of your time. Why bother with that? And he says, but Jim, I don't know which 10% I'm going to use from game to game. And he's so right about that. And now when I show my preparation techniques as part of my classes, most of the kids look at it like, whoa, like, really? That's a little much. Well, first of all, I love it. So it's not work. I love digging into a team, finding out about its players, about its history, about everything, so that I'm ready for that broadcast. But I also know that if I prepare the way I do, that going into that broadcast, I feel 100% ready. And that makes me a better broadcaster. Just the fact that I feel like, bring it on. Whatever's going to happen, I'm ready for it. Now, is that true? No. I mean, was Al Michaels ready to call an earthquake in 1989 when he showed up to do the World Series? No. Some things happen in live sports, live television that you can't prepare for. A gate fell off a door in Cleveland where we had this long delay when we were playing a neutral site game there. And we had to talk for ad nauseum about stuff. These things happen that you can't prepare for. But going into that broadcast, I want to feel as though I've got it licked, because just that feeling makes you better. Athlete who's playing with confidence.
Well, I think you just froze up there for a few seconds.
Right? It's that feeling that I've got this, and it makes you a better broadcaster. So I learned that from Gene, the preparation. As for following him, and I'm glad you corrected yourself on that, because whenever anyone says, what was it like replacing Gene Hart? I said, I wouldn't know. No one replaces a Gene Hart. He was I like to put it this way, and it sounds nice. He was the eloquent messenger of glorious times for this franchise, and that he was. He called the 2 Stanley Cup championships. But more than that, he taught this entire market about hockey, about the NHL. He was a teacher. He was a former teacher. He got into broadcasting, and he did it so well. And he is a large part of why there is such a fervent Flyers fan base. Even after 2 tough years, there's a fervent Flyers fan base. Let me tell you, if the Flyers get off to a good start next year, this will be a hockey mad city again. They are used to success, though. And that came from those Broad Street bullies, but it also came from Gene Hart teaching them so well about the game. So he's a Hall of Famer. He's an icon in Philadelphia. So I could never replace him. I followed him, and for many years, maybe 10, I'd get the fans coming up to me, and they try to be nice and say, you're no Gene Hart, but you're okay. Or, you don't even try to be Gene Hart, but, we'll take you, stuff like that. The nice ones would say, hey, we love Gene and we love you too. And I got that pretty consistently for about 10 years. I also got some, when I first took over, we didn't have email back then, thankfully. We certainly didn't have social media back then, thankfully. But I got some very angry mail, snail mail. One in particular, I remember threatening my kids, which was quite interesting because I didn't have any kids, but at the time. So, be with that what it was. When you are a broadcast icon in a town like Philadelphia, once you've made it there, they take you to heart. You are them. You are part of them. And Gene was that. So I was kind of the outsider. I wasn't from Philly, coming in. So it might have taken a while. But now, 30 years, hopefully they've gotten used to me. And, I don't get as many of those questions. Scarily, I think about it. Anybody 35 and younger now doesn't even remember Gene. So because his last year on the air was 96, 95, 96. Actually 94, 95 was his last year on the air. He did some Phantoms games after that, but with the Flyers, 94, 95 was his last year. Well, you do that, you do the math there. What we're talking 27 years since he was even on the air. And so if you were 7 or 8, you might have seen a year or two of Gene Hart. 35 and younger, they don't remember Gene too much. Now they remember hearing about him from their parents. But it is getting to the point where, in my mind, it's sad that some people don't even remember Gene, but certainly the middle agers and the seniors, I still occasionally get I was a big Gene Hart fan, but we like you too.
And I was going to say, Philadelphia is a great sports town for broadcasters. Obviously, Gene Hart, the late Harry Callis, and then
I'll interrupt you on that. Harry I worked with the Phillies, and I was sitting right next to him when he called the '08 World Series title final out. It's right up at the top of the list for me of my broadcast highlights. I was doing the post game show, but I was sitting right next to this guy who I had so much respect for. And back in 1980, when the Phillies had won the World Series, he couldn't call the last out. There was exclusivity back then for the national radio networks. They redid it later, but he didn't really call it live. So he had waited and hoped to get this opportunity. Tragically, he was gone less than a year later, but he got that opportunity, and I was sitting right next to him, and he nails the call, and he's got tears in his eyes, and to hug him right afterwards, chills. I get chills right now thinking about it. So Harry was being on the same float with him in the parade and hearing the Harry chants bounce off the walls from hundreds of thousands of people. It was something I'll never, ever forget. Right up there at the top of the list. People always ask me, what's your favorite broadcast moment? And I mentioned that, and they're saying, well, I mean something you called. And I said, well, I called the post-game show. I was there sitting right next to Harry. So I have to put that right up near the top.
Yeah, my late father back in 1984 took me to a couple of Philly games at the Vet as a 12-year-old kid, and I love that stadium. And I got to see the Phillies, Mike Schmidt, Steve Carlton, Pete Rose with Montreal, and then I remember watching some of the Phillies games on TV when I was in Philadelphia for that week, and I really enjoyed listening or watching Harry Karras and Richie Ashburn, Chris Wheeler, Andy Muzzer, and it's like, and then hey, I'm an Eagles fan, by the way, here, Jim, in Guelph, and I'm a huge Merle Reese fan. And as soon as I hear his voice, I'm like, this is Eagles football.
Yeah, no doubt about that. He has a very distinct voice, and Merle, I think 1977 was his first year.
Yeah,
I mean, Merle Reese, that's a run. That's coming up on 50 years with one team. I mean, that just doesn't happen very often. We've talked about PA announcers and the Flyers and Lou Nolan,
yep,
and the Phillies with Dan Baker have two of, I think, three PA announcers right now that have been 50 years with one team. And they're approaching the record of Bob Shepard, the legendary PA voice of the Yankees. For a PA announcer, it's an accomplishment. For a play-by-play announcer, one team, 50 years, that's just incredible.
Definitely. Are you okay for a couple more minutes, or are you
Sure.
going to get going? Okay. This one I had to ask you. Most memorable, I didn't want to say favorite, most memorable game you've called so far with Keith Jones or even the late Gene Hart. And what's your favorite, most memorable goal call?
Well, I get this a lot, as you might imagine, and I never really know how to answer it. For so long, my answer was 2000, Flyers, Penguins, longest game in the modern history of the NHL, 8 periods, 5 overtimes, Keith Primo goal. So I could answer your question, both your questions, with one, because it was the Primo goal and that game. Because how often are you part of NHL history, right? And the only 2 games longer than that game took place when the forward pass wasn't allowed. So in my mind, it's the longest game in the modern history of the NHL, the way the game's played now, the way we know it. So to be able to call that game will always be, and in fact, right there is the box score, the
Wow.
stat sheet from that game, will always be, right up there at the top. But then, that decade rolled along. I got a chance to do a game in Toronto, actually the last second round game the Leafs ever played, when Jeremy Roenick scored in overtime to send the Flyers on to the conference finals. That came after Sammy Kapanen had been hit really hard by Darcy Tucker and was groggy trying to get back to the bench. And there was this whole wild sequence, and JR finally scored, and I barely had any voice left because I was out of oxygen. I've had a lot of fans say that's their favorite call of mine. So I put that one up there. And then there was 2010 when the Flyers and Rangers play in a shootout to determine which team goes to the playoffs. It doesn't get more dramatic than 82-game season coming down to 2 hated rivals in a shootout. Henrik Lundqvist, one of the best shootout goalies, and Brian Boucher and the Flyers with Claude Giroux scoring the game-winning shootout goal, win it and go on to the playoffs, and then go on to trail Boston 3-0 and come back and win that series and get a chance to call that comeback, including the Game 7 where they fall down 3 goals and come back and win. So in and among those 4, the Primo goal, the Roenick goal in 04, the two 2010 moments, the shootout and the Boston goal. They're my favorite ones. But there are literally, Chris, hundreds of great moments. I adore this sport. I'm watching these Stanley Cup playoffs this year. I did, as I said, 2 games for TNT, but basically I'm watching these as a fan. And I really didn't for 14 years when I was doing baseball get a chance to do that. I called Flyers games when they were in the playoffs, but as soon as the Flyers are done, it was to baseball. And baseball is every night, so you don't get a chance to see much of the Stanley Cup playoffs. But last year and this year, I've been able to just sit back and watch the playoffs. And last year was good, but there weren't any fans in Canada yet. This year's been pretty normal. And to call it normal is unbelievable because the entertainment level of these, the wild and crazy games, the stars shining, the controversies, the physicality, the just what these guys go through. You watch the Tampa Bay Lightning and block shots, and it's just I don't think there's anything like it in sport. We talked about it earlier. I think it's the hardest trophy to win. I also think it's the most entertaining playoff out there. I mean, I've done playoff baseball. There's great drama in that, and I like that. How do you get any better than football? The playoffs. I mean, you think about the divisional playoffs last year in the NFL, tremendous games. It's awesome. NBA, I'm not sure the NBA playoffs elevate that much over the regular season compared to the other sports. But the bottom line is, I don't think you can top the NHL. NFL is awesome, and baseball with the drama is all. They all have their great elements, but you have everything with the Stanley Cup playoffs when you're talking all those elements that I mentioned earlier. So it's great. And to be able to call that and to be able to get a chance to call so many great moments for the Flyers over the last 3 decades has truly been an honor and a privilege.
Have you ever thought about writing a book about your experiences?
I probably will. That brings up a pretty touchy question right about now because, I'm 59. I don't feel like I'm close to retirement, but the calendar's telling me I am. Mark Zumoff just retired as the play-by-play voice of the Sixers. He was 64, maybe 65. We started at the same time here in Philadelphia. So his retirement, even though he's a little older than I am, but his retirement completely shocked me. And then I'm watching some guys retire this year,
RJ in Buffalo.
Yeah, RJ. I mean, RJ's got me by several years, but Pat Foley, Rick Jeanneret, Dennis Beck, these guys are all leaving the sport. I'm forgetting one other retirement that I should know. Rick Peckham recently retired. And so really the Mark Zumoff one, though, sent me into I got to look at this. How many more years do I have? But I don't feel like I'm ready to retire. So it's weird when, you see that there might be the end of the run here coming up. I really want to see the Flyers win the Cup first. I want to be part of it. I'm not ever going to call it thanks to the national exclusivity, but I still want to be around it, be part of the organization when they do it. So I've got that to hang on to, but I also want to be one of these guys who hangs on long, after his time is gone. I mean, hockey's a tough sport. It's a tough sport to call. You have to have really good eyesight. You have to have really good articulation. We lose that. We lose our eyesight. We lose our ability to articulate as we get older. Father Time waits for no one. We said it already. So, it's a delicate balance we watch as to when I would get out. What was your original question? It brought me to thinking about retirement, but I can't remember what it was now. So
just I guess with all these great announcers and stuff like that, you're right. A lot of them have been retiring, like Pat Foley. And I guess right now, Joel Bowen would be the longest serving broadcaster in the NHL.
Yeah, he's on radio. Sam Rosen's the television longest. I'm not sure which of them started earlier because Sam Rosen's been doing the Rangers. I went to a game when I was in college with my roommate, Craig Minervini. It's a second mention in this podcast. He won a Marv Albert sound-alike contest. And the prize was to spend the game in Buffalo, Rangers Buffalo, in the booth with Sam and Phil Esposito who were doing the game. So we got to do that, and they actually took us out to Sinatra's in Buffalo afterwards, and we're actually hanging out as college kids, having beers with NHL players and NHL announcers. It was a great time. But, I mean, Sam's been around that long. I mean, since I was back in college. And before that, actually, he took over for Jim Gordon, I believe. So Sam probably started in around 1980, I'm thinking. I'm not sure when Joe started in radio.
82.
So they're probably
82.
pretty close. But both still right at the top of their game. So it's great to see them have these long runs. But it's still, I didn't even think about retirement. I thought it was some long off thing until Mark Zumoff retired. And then I'm like, I got to think about this. And a couple other people around the Flyers organization are retiring that I feel are in my age group. And, it's like Bill Clement retired just last year. By the way, Bill Clement today announced as the winner of the award to go into the Hall of Fame.
Awesome.
Foster Hewitt Award. And Al Morgani's going in as the writer. So two people I've worked with and both so deserving. Bill is I worked with him, as it turned out, for like 12 years. And I always remember, it's like, this is the guy I watched as a young broadcaster. I can't say as a kid, but as a college kid and as a young broadcaster, I watched him. And then I ended up working with him, and it was just awesome. He's just a wordsmith. And, he was the top analyst along with John Davidson in the U.S., calling hockey for so many years on ESPN and Sports Channel America before that. He deserved to get this a long time ago, to be honest with you. And I talked with Doc Emmerich about, let's get Bill in a long time ago. But finally, Doc really, he put pedal to the metal and he got it done. And he got voted in unanimously. So, and Al, I'm around all the time here in Philadelphia, is such a great guy, and he's so witty. So these are two great guys to go in, and well-deserved. And I found out that news today. I couldn't have been happier. So I know that's a tangent, but I wanted to get out there. But Bill also recently retired. So there's all these people retiring around me. Some are a little older than I am, but it's still, it makes, I hope it figures I'd freeze then. Yes. Talking about those student loans. Yeah. I wish they would freeze and go away. But anyhow, it's been a great run, and I hope I've got a little more runway left, because I do want to see that cup go down Broad Street before I'm done.
Absolutely. Did you ever work with Gary Dornhoff?
Yes, Gary Dornhoff was my first TV analyst. 1995, I took over. I'm sure he will tell you a great story about my first preseason game. I was deer in headlights for sure, because I had been a radio guy. I'd done radio all through college and into the Utica days and my first 2 years in Philadelphia. I had never done a TV hockey game. And there I am following Gene Hart. And, Dorney was an awesome partner. I always used to say, if ever I was somehow involved in a war and needed someone next to me in the trench, that's who I'd want, because he always had my back. He was just a completely reliable person. I worked with him from 95 through 05, 06. So I had a good long run with Dorney. Steve Coates was in the booth with me for a while. A trip, so much fun. But how lucky have I been? I mean, my broadcast partners, Gary Dornhofer, Steve Coates, Bill Clement, and Keith Jones. I mean,
yes,
they're all three of the guys, when you're talking about Dornhofer, my main analyst in the booth with me, Dornhofer, and then Bill and Jonesy, have all been national guys who are at the top of the profession as analysts. So I have been completely blessed. And Coatsy, maybe not national, but Coatsy, just great to be around. So for people that are actually in the booth working with me, I've also been blessed to work with other people. Jody Shelley, most recently for those TNT games, outstanding. Jody Shelley, let me tell you, he should be doing national games consistently in the near future. Works hard, well-spoken, has a passion for the game, really understands the game. So I hope that happens for him. And then back in the days, I worked with Andy Brickley, Eddie Olchuk, Ray Ferraro, back in the early days of NBC. So I've had the opportunity to work with the best of the best. I have been completely 100% blessed to have great broadcast partners, and they're as big a reason why I've been able to last 30 years as anything.
And I've been lucky living here in Canada to have some of the greatest of all time with Bob Cole and Jim Houston.
Absolutely.
and then with the Red Wings.
Jim. I wish Jim was still calling games. He's so good.
Yes, and Chris Cuthbert has done a really good job as well too. So
Chris, a good friend of mine. I mean, I love Chris. He has a very distinct voice, but he's another one of those guys. I mean, it was pretty, I thought, noteworthy when they were doing the tease for the Battle of Alberta. The last time they played, there it was. Chris Cuthbert did the game, and he's doing it again now. How many years later?
30 years later, yeah.
Yeah. So that's Chris is just one of the best guys in the business, and so good at what he does. So yeah, Canada's had a great run with announcers. I mean, whether Danny Gallivan's the guy I listened to as a kid, the Cannonading Blast, and then you transitioned from him to Bob Cole for all those years, and then Jim Houston. And now Chris. I mean, it's just a great litany of play-by-play broadcasters, and it should be that way in Canada because it's Canada's sport, so they should have the best.
And I've been spoiled too with the Red Wings with Ken Daniels and Mickey Redmond the last 25 years. I had Ken Daniels on my podcast, and he's one of the nicest guys you'll ever meet too.
Yeah, he's he's been around right around the same amount of time I have, and he's had, life sent him some tough challenges, and he just plows ahead and really solid. He and Mickey have such great chemistry. It was Dave Strader before Kenny.
And, he was great. The late Dave Strader.
Just, a dear friend of mine, and miss him to this day, but another just really super quality broadcaster and person.
Okay. And I just wanted to wrap this up, Jim, if you're okay for like 2 more minutes. Just quick thoughts on this 21-22 Flyers team, and where does this organization need to improve upon for next season? And for my audience here in Ontario, who are some of the young prospects to watch for out in Philadelphia? And I know one of them is Isaac Ratcliffe, who played for the Guelph Storm.
Yeah, Isaac's a guy I hope has a consistent role next year. Got a couple of looks this year. In a fourth line role. And I think that's where he's going to start in the NHL, but I really think he's a guy who could show enough to end up being one of those fourth line guys that ends up on the second power play, then maybe takes advantage of it a little bit and moves up the lineup. I like Isaac's play, and I think with the right coach and the right structure, he's an NHL player for sure. But in general, this season, Chris, was a disaster. I mean, I sound like a shill for the team when I say this, but injuries killed their season. I mean, there's no team out there that could be without their number one center, their number 1 or 2 defenseman, and their number 2 center for virtually the entire season and survive it. But on top of that, they lost 500-man games to injury from other players. Joel Farabee missed significant time. Other key players were out. And they had a coach in Alain Vigneault who didn't change much when things started to go off the rails. And I think the pandemic, I might be speaking out of turn here, but I think the pandemic took a little bit out of AV. I don't think he enjoyed doing his job as well in the restricted area in the bubble, or then after that with everything being separated. I think this is a guy who really enjoyed the life of the NHL, and I think he really missed that. And then he had some things going on personally too that would really weigh on his mind. And he didn't seem to change when things went off the rail. And Mike Yeo came in, and people forget this, but the Flyers had that 10-game winless streak. Yeo comes in, and they actually were 5-0-2 into the Christmas break, and they really were starting to play better. And then they get hit with COVID. And I mean, Sean, all the injured guys were already injured. Then you had Claude Giroux, Ivan Provorov to the COVID list. And they played a couple of games I quite frankly don't think they should have played. I think the game should have been postponed, but they were just so undermanned against Pittsburgh in one game I remember in particular. And then they go into another tailspin. And, okay, there's a lack of depth in the organization. You shouldn't have completely tanked out when you had this adversity, but they had a ton of adversity this year. So this year to me is one that it was awful. The younger players didn't develop. Most of the key players got injured. COVID hit, coaching change, all this. It just was a tough year. But in saying that, I am not part of this big group of people, especially here in Philadelphia. Some of the people are saying that it's going to take years and years for the Flyers to be good again, because in 06-07, the Flyers had their worst year ever. The next year they were in the conference finals. Now, I'm not saying this team will be in the conference finals next year. That team added Scott Hartnell, Kimmo Timonen, and Danny Briere, Joffrey Lupul. Late in the year before that, Marty Biron and Braden Coburn, a whole bunch of players, which I don't think this team can do that because of the salary cap, the constraints they're under. But I do think that if they get Couturier back, they get Ellis back, and they have Hayes playing the way he did at the end of the year, and they add one key offensive player to help the power play, Johnny Gaudreau's name's out there, and then they get their young players to develop. I'm a Carter Hart guy. I believe he's not only a good goalie, I think in a good structured system, he's a great goalie. This team could be back in the playoffs next year. I'm telling you, it's not that far off. If you look at their roster with their injured players back, those are ifs. But Couturier was skating pretty much full bore by the end of the year. Hayes was. Ellis is the question mark in my mind. But if he comes back and Provorov has his partner, he plays much better. Sanheim took leaps and bounds this year. He plays with Ristolainen in second pair. Cam York's part of your third pair. You might need a veteran right-handed shooting defenseman in your third pair. Your forward lines, I can put together 4 pretty good lines with all the players healthy if you throw in a Gaudreau. It's just, to me, all this talk about they're so far off. It's going to take a good off season for sure. The biggest move is the first one. They get the right coach. But if they get a John Tortorella or Barry Trotz in here, those guys are proven. Barry Trotz took a team with the worst goals against average in the league and took them to the best goals against average in the league his first year in the job on the island. So who's to say he can't do something similar to that with the Flyers? So I just don't think they're as far off as people think. I like some of their young talent. I like Joel Farabee. I like Noah Cates. I like Cam York. Sanheim really took a big step. As I said, you throw him in there with Provorov, who I think can take another big step, and Konechny if he's still here. These are guys that are good players. I mean, it's not as far off. So as bad as this year was and the year before, really, I mean, people forget that from mid-November to mid-March of the 1920 season, the Flyers had the second most points, tied for the second most points in the NHL. They allowed the fewest shots on goal per game. They were winning those games convincingly. They were outplaying teams. Carter Hart wasn't stealing a bunch of games. That's a 5-month period, Chris. You don't go on a streak for 5 months. If you're one of the top teams in the league from mid-November to mid-March, 4 months, whatever, you are one of the better teams. And, they won a playoff series, won all 3 round-robin games, won a playoff series, went 7 games in the second round in the bubble. So they weren't that bad then. I don't think they're that bad now. And I think if you give them some health and maybe a little addition, tweaking, and a good coach, they can be right back there next year in contention.
Yeah, the Red Wings are also looking for a head coach too. So
a lot of teams are. It's a wild and crazy market that I feel like we're at that point, like when you play the game Kerplunk. Remember that? The first thing's going to fall. I think it will be Barry Trotz. And then we're going to have a mad dash of signing because the draft is coming up. You want your coach in place by the draft. So I'm assuming that I don't think they're waiting for the finals to end. I think they're waiting for the first coach. And I think that first coach would be Barry Trotz. I think he's number one on many teams' lists. And once he goes somewhere, I think everything falls into place real quickly, but it'll be fun.
I still think Mike Babcock at some point will be back in the league as well at some point.
Yeah, he's a name I haven't heard too much about with all these coaches out there. But if he wants it, I think some team might take a chance. I mean, it didn't end well for him in Toronto, obviously, but it didn't end well for some of these coaches. That's why they were let go, right? So I don't know if I've ever seen this accomplished a list of coaches available in one off season.
Okay. And I'm just going to wrap it up, Jim. I probably kept you longer than I should have, but I really enjoyed hearing your stories today. Any advice for those, not just myself, looking to pursue a career in broadcasting, TV, radio, and where can my audience here find you on social media?
Yeah, I mean, my advice is what I said earlier. You have a dream. It might seem far off, way out there, and you probably have people telling you it is such. Doesn't matter. Shoot for it. Because when you're my age, you don't want to be looking back saying, yeah, I had a decent life, but if only I'd given that a try. I don't have to say that. I always wanted to be a broadcaster, and I'm doing it. So I'm completely fulfilled professionally from that standpoint. So I want you to have that same. And if you don't make it, at least you gave it a shot, right? And then, as I said, preparation, experience, perseverance. Get lots of those, have lots of those, and you'll be successful. I am at Jim J. Philly on Twitter. That's it for social media. I'm not an Instagram or Facebook person. JimJacksonBroadcasting.com is my website, which you can get information on my coaching, audiobook narration, cameo, all that kind of stuff. So, but the broadcast coaching is the main emphasis. If you are out there and you're anywhere from 12 to 59, you can be 65 for all I'm concerned. And you have broadcast aspirations, I'd love to work with you. Check out this site and get the information, and then contact me and we'll go.
Okay, I will definitely do that as well. And Jim, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on live with CDP podcast. This is my 162nd episode in the last 2.5 years,
You've
and
done a
I've
full
been
baseball season, Chris. You've done a full baseball season.
yes, and
162.
too. And I've been very lucky to get guests like yourself, Jack Michaels, Derek Wills, Ken Daniels, and Tom McCarthy's one of my favorite guys. I'm really lucky, and I'm just going to keep grinding away at this, keep improving, and doing as much as I can because I really have a passion for sports and talking to people and learning from hearing storytelling.
Well, I can tell you do have that passion. So, and I see your posts, might be on LinkedIn where I see your post a lot of the time, or is it Twitter? I'm not sure, one of them. And
Both
I can
LinkedIn and
see,
Twitter.
yeah, I see you're involved, and keep it up. You know, that's your passion. Go for it.
And the National Lacrosse League is a new sport that I'm into now, and I love it. It's like hockey and basketball. So I'm looking forward to the third game between Buffalo and Colorado this Saturday in Buffalo. But Jim, I'm gonna let you go. But hey, I want to say thank you so much, Jim, for coming on. And maybe again in the future, I can maybe have you back on again and talk some more Philadelphia Flyers hockey.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're going to have some moves you're going to want to talk about before the next season starts, between the coach, some of the free agent moves, trades, all that stuff. So would be glad to go on again.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Jim, and we'll definitely keep in touch with you on social media with LinkedIn and on Twitter.
Sounds good, Chris. Take
Have
care.
a great day. You too. Anyways, guys, I hope you enjoyed my podcast today, season 3, episode 52, with Jim Jackson, the longtime TV voice, the Philadelphia Flyers on NBC Sports in Philadelphia, along with Keith Jones. And it was great talking to him about the Flyers hockey today and stuff like that. So, guys, just to let you know, my next podcast is going to be this Friday, June 17th at 10 a.m. My guest is going to be Griffin Della Pena. He's a content writer for the Buffalo Bandits and Buffalo Sabres. He was supposed to come on last night, Griffin, but he had a work commitment and he didn't have a chance to get on my podcast. So this Friday, June 17th, 10 a.m. Eastern, Griffin Della Pena will come on my podcast, and we're going to talk a little bit about the Buffalo Bandits and the Buffalo Sabres and stuff like that. So I'm looking forward to that. And then on Monday, June 20th at 4 o'clock, I'm going to have Rick Zamprin, the morning host on CHML 900 in Hamilton, and the host of the fifth quarter for the Hamilton Tiger Cats after their games on CHML. Come on, and we're going to talk some CFL with Rick and the Hamilton Tiger Cats and the Hamilton Bulldogs, and maybe a little bit about his Toronto Maple Leafs as well, because Rick Zamprin is a huge Toronto Maple Leafs fan. But anyways, guys, so I'm looking forward to my next podcast this Friday, June 17th, 10 a.m. with Griffin Della Pena, and we're going to talk Bandits and Sabres with him as well. And always, guys, just to let you know, Live with CDP podcast, the audio version is downloaded to Google Podcasts, Anchor FM, Apple Podcasts, Breaker, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Spotify, Castbox, and LinkedIn. And I want to say thank you to everybody watching this live on my YouTube channel. Please hit the subscribe notification if you already haven't. And thank you to those watching on Facebook Live and also on my Twitter page at Chris D. Pame as well. And also, guys, you guys can follow me on TikTok at Live with CDP. That's at Live with CDP on TikTok. The other day, I posted some pictures and some videos from the Bulldogs Spitfire Game 5 I did in Hamilton. And one of my videos went viral. And I didn't think much of it. It was basically the opening of the Bulldogs Spitfire game. And they turned down the lights in the arena, and they had everyone turn their flashlights on their cell phones on with music. And I recorded about a minute of it, and I posted it on my TikTok page, and now has over 21,000 views and over 2,000 likes. So usually my videos on TikTok are maybe 200, 300 views and maybe 5 likes. And I post this one video and I've got 21,000 views and over 2,100 likes. So check me out on TikTok if you like, at Live with CDP. And I also did a nice interview with Reese Dumani from the Hamilton Bulldogs audio network on there as well. So, and that game 7, Bulldogs Spitfires, tomorrow night, Wednesday at 7 o'clock, TSN, and on CKLW 800 in Windsor with Steve Manny Pava, and also on the Hamilton Bulldogs audio network with Reed Dutchy as well. So that should be some kind of game tomorrow night with the Bulldogs Spitfires. The winner goes to the Memorial Cup and becomes the OHL champions tomorrow night. So hope you guys can tune into that as well. And again, guys, you can follow my guest that was on today, Jim Jackson, on Twitter at Jim J Philly. And Jim is also on LinkedIn if you want to follow him on, connect with him on LinkedIn, Jim Jackson as well. And you can check out NBCsports.com/Philadelphia. And if you want the latest on Philadelphia Flyers news, you can check out NHL.com/Flyers. So anyways, guys, I'm going to call this a podcast show. But again, before I wrap it up, guys, the 2022 NHL Stanley Cup begins Wednesday, June 15th, Tampa Bay, Colorado at 8 p.m. I'm picking Tampa over Colorado in 6 games. So, all right, guys. Again, I want to say thank you to Jim Jackson from the Flyers for coming on today and talking about his career and Philadelphia Flyers hockey. And just want to say thank you to everybody, again, watching this live on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and later on my audio platforms, Apple, Google, etc. So I hope everybody has a great afternoon and look forward to seeing you guys on Friday, June 17th, 10 a.m. Again, my guest, Griffin Della Pena. He's a content writer for the Buffalo Sabres and Bandits websites, and we're going to talk about the Buffalo Bandits and if they can win the 2022 NL Championship this Saturday night against the Colorado Mammoths, which is going to be Saturday night at 8 o'clock on TSN, ESPN Plus, and I think on the radio WGR 550 in Buffalo as well. So we'll talk to Griffin about that as well. So, all right, guys, I hope you have a great day. And we'll see you guys Friday morning at 10 o'clock for another edition of Live with CDP Podcast. Have a great day and evening, everybody.